5 goals at Stamford Bridge last night.
Yep.
Chelsea overcame Newcastle United 3-2 at Stamford Bridge. Newcastle fans, you were magnificent. So many of you down in London on a fairly miserable Monday night, but well done. It'll be a long trip back. Cole Palmer, Simon, one positive note Chelsea can point to, I would have thought, in a season of struggle up until now.
Yeah. You know, ultimately he's a good player. Whether he'll make the Euros, I think, is debatable. But I think he has.
He should make the Euros.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that he will make.
13 goals, 11 assists.
I understand that, but I'm not sure that he'll make the European Championship squads. I don't think he's had quite the impact that will leverage him in there. But he can be part of the conversation. But I think, there's an argument that he has the potential to be a really significant player in a season where Chelsea have not been what people anticipated. Certainly me. I think he's one of the few shining lights. And I would argue the case that if Manchester City had really wanted to have kept him, because people are saying that Chelsea have plucked him from Manchester City and that ultimately it was Cole Palmer not wanting to be patient like Phil Foden was, not wanting to bide his time like Jadon Sancho didn't want to bide his time at Manchester City. I think if Pep Guardiola had really wanted to keep Cole Palmer, because they're not under financial fair play, any kind of governance from that point of view, I think they sold him because they perhaps didn't think he was right for Manchester City. Now, at this stage in Chelsea's transition, because they've got so few shining lights, then Cole Palmer will shine through.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. I'd like him to go. I like the boy. I think he's done ever so well there.
He's done well, yeah.
And is a shining light. I think he would thoroughly deserve his opportunity should he get to Germany. And if he does, we'll see him out there. What about Eddie Howe and Newcastle, though, Simon? Where are Newcastle now? They're 10th. 1 point above Chelsea in 11th. Chelsea have a game in hand. An FA Cup quarter-final at Manchester City to come for Newcastle United this weekend. If they go out at that, and you have to think they probably might, what is left for them? I mean, when you look at Eddie, does he get more of a free pass than the likes of Pochettino and Ten Hag, as I said in the introduction to the show this morning?
No. Because no, not really, because ultimately Chelsea and Man United have been clubs that have achieved something in the last 20 years. Man United are arguably the poster boys for the Premier League, or were for a significant period, and are now being eclipsed by Man City. Chelsea were one of the factors that changed the face of English football with Roman Abramovich's money. They've won Premier Leagues and European Cups, Champions League Cup tournaments. Newcastle have done nothing, and are a club that's been bought at a time when governance is becoming more prevalent, so they can't flex their muscles the way that other clubs have been able to. So I think comparing the pressures on Ten Hag, an elite football club like Manchester United, comparing the pressures on Pochettino with £1 billion spend behind him in the recent seasons, and also the achievements of Chelsea, is not the same as comparing it to Newcastle with the expectation level of an awful owner that they want consigned to the history. That's their view, not mine. And ultimately a club that's building towards something. I don't think
the expectation levels have changed at Newcastle United, Simon.
But that's what we say.
Is he scrutinised as much because he's an English manager?
But that's what we say.
And he's popular and he's likeable. Is he scrutinised in the way he should be?
But I argue with the characterisation. Where have expectation levels arisen? Have the expectation levels arisen amongst the fans? I know we've had Amanda Staveley come out and suggest that Newcastle are going to win this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
Well, she says a lot of things, and we'll see how that pans out.
Yeah.
But the point is that we saw sections of the media scrutinising Eddie Howe on the back of a significant drop of form after the Champions League run, and we will see what the ownership model does at the end of the season. I wouldn't be surprised, and I've maintained the view that Eddie Howe won't get you to the promised land. So actually, he is getting more scrutiny from people like me, because I'm saying he doesn't even get a passage of time to build towards that. Eventually, Eddie Howe's going to be replaced. That's a kind of unkind look at it, isn't it?
No, unkind on whose part?
My part, because I'm basically saying that Eddie Howe...
Oh, no, I think you're being realistic about it.
I think I'm being realistic, but certain people would characterise it as unkind and suggest that ultimately you should enjoy the journey and not worry about the destination.
You see, there's Ryan, who's a regular contributor to the show. Guys, good morning. Eddie Howe does get a free pass, just like every other English manager and player. The football media in this country has put aside their British bias for people to start taking them seriously again.
So tell that to Steve Cooper. When he was in a job for 5 minutes, got the team promoted to the Premier League, and within 5 minutes the media are pouring over the fact that he's likely to be fired. His owner came out and gave him a new contract, and eventually Steve Cooper got fired. I think managers get judged by their performances and the climate and the dynamics of the club. Arteta being a case in point. there's a change of direction in the ownership model, a change in perspective. Post the European Super League, Arteta got a very different ownership model than was there previously.
I'm going to put something very heavy to you on Eddie. The other side of this was Eddie post-match after that 3-2 defeat at Stamford Bridge last night.
It's difficult to draw too many conclusions from one result. I think that, you know, our form over a long period of time hasn't been what we want it to be. It hasn't been as consistent as it needs to be to get into European competition. I feel our form is gradually coming back, and there is a but, we're still hurting ourselves by not being complete in our performance today. We're inconsistent even within that game. There were some really good bits, there were some not so good bits, and I think that's the frustration for everybody, because we know we're close, but we still have a gap to where we were consistently last season.
Anton Portsmouth is a bit confused about Eddie. Simon, Jim, I'm still not sure if this is the longest honeymoon period ever, or if he's still the second coming of a god. You see, the thing is this, Simon, and I hope they don't. Let's say Newcastle United go out to City this weekend in the FA Cup. Let's say Newcastle hover around 10th or 11th come May, and that's as good as it gets for them this season. Is Eddie gone?
I think there's a challenge for him there, because it depends upon the rational approach of their owner and who they've put in place. The guy from the PIF fund that apparently doesn't work for the PIF fund yet in America. He's been announced as being part of the PIF fund, because ultimately the PIF fund has got nothing to do with the government. But we'll discuss that in a different perspective, I should imagine, at some different time. But the point is that Eddie Howe is, when you're comparing Eddie Howe to what other clubs have done, Arteta's been in situ for 4 years at Arsenal. He's won nothing besides an FA Cup in his first season, okay? And he's been given significantly more money, came from a position of a more established football club with a better base than the one that Eddie Howe has had. So I think there's an inherent unfairness in...
Yeah, but Arteta finished 8th, 5th, 2nd.
Yeah, but Arsenal are a bigger football club with more heritage, more legacy and a better base than Newcastle. Newcastle have come from a position where the owner has not wanted to invest in the football club in any significant level, and his ambitions were predominantly to stay in the Premier League. Now that dial has turned. So Eddie Howe in 2 years has turned it from a relegation-avoiding football club to a top-end competing football club with one season of perhaps punching above their weight, where they caught a wave and they performed brilliantly and were very unlucky in the Champions League this season.
So answer my question, does Eddie take them into next season?
I don't know the owners enough to be able to determine whether they think that he's moving in the right direction or whether they think they're regressing. Questions could be asked. One of the things I talked about was Eddie Howe's inability at times to produce teams that can defend. And the thing that happened with Bournemouth in the end was, once their forwards stopped scoring goals, their defence leaked and they got relegated. I'm not suggesting Newcastle are going to get relegated, but we are seeing Newcastle concede a lot more goals this season than in previous seasons. So maybe levels are coming. But I don't think he avoids scrutiny. I think Newcastle are a different animal to Chelsea, a different animal to Manchester United, a different animal to Arsenal. And if at the end of next season, Eddie, I think he merits another opportunity to continue the building. I think Newcastle will finish inside the top 10. They might finish 9th or 8th, but I think they'll finish inside the top 10.
Okay,
that's not success compared to what they had the previous season, but it's a degree of stability. And if they can launch off that, buy better players, and continue their progress, then I think he's worthy of another season. But I still maintain the same view that if the ultimate aim, if Amanda Staveley wants to open her mouth and tell people that the football club is going to win everything, then she needs to describe how they're going to do that.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to do it spending £150 million every season. Yeah. When your competition is spending £250 million and already better than you because they've got better bases.
There's a great message for a friend of mine who's a Newcastle fan. Eddie ultimately overachieved last season and is now being held to those overachieving standards. They may be the richest club in the world, but he's not been able to spend the money like other clubs have done. Yeah. Two very good points here.
Yeah, the club's not the richest club in the world. The owners are. And given the governance that's around football, they can only spend a certain amount of money. Yeah. And so with that in mind, they're going to have to be prepared to accept that there's going to be an element of this will take a longer period of time to build something, given the nature of the rules have changed since Chelsea and it changed. Chelsea changed it. It changed for Man City. They had disadvantages that Chelsea didn't have. And it's changed again for Newcastle. Yeah. So you have to accept that you're going to build. Now, if the ownership model, the only people that we don't know what they think of it, we know that certain sections of the media suggest that Eddie Howe's getting a pass. We know that potentially whenever we bring this subject up, Newcastle fans come in and say, no, we're comfortable with Eddie Howe, leave him alone. Right. We don't know what the state of mind of the owners is. They didn't buy a football club to be part of the Premier League. My expectation is they bought a football club to be at the top of the league. So it depends upon how they view it rather than ultimately we view it. I know that's statement bleeding obvious.
No, that's a good point. I think it's a relevant point. They want to eat at Europe's top table. That's what they want to do. Steve's a Newcastle fan saying exactly what you've just said. Great show, guys, but you guys need to get real. Total poppycock. Eddie's job is completely safe. He did a brilliant job last season. That's last season. I emphasise, though, Steve. I'll put it out there this morning. Is scrutiny lighter on English managers? Do we scrutinise them as closely as we do foreign managers here in the English game?
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the TalkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. TalkSPORT.